all of this stuff comes back to how do you do more CPR? Whether that's how do you perfect your CPR with your crews? How do you get more CPR out in the community? How do you distribute that response and make it faster and more likely that people in cardiac arrest are going to receive CPR and AEDs?
Welcome to Ops Talk, Westminster Fire Department's operational training podcast, where we share ideas and knowledge through honest conversations, highlighting the people who do the work. I'm Eric Linnenburger, Deputy Chief of Operations. While built as a resource for our members, we invite the greater fire service and the community to be part of the conversation. What we share reflects our current approach under present conditions. Always follow your department's procedures and guidelines.
Welcome to the Ops Talk podcast. I'm your host, Eric Linnenburger. So 2025 was a big year for Westminster Fire Department EMS. We saw our cardiac arrest return to spontaneous circulation ROSC rate increase by 200% compared to previous years. That's right, 200%. Today, we're talking with EMS Chief Chad Christian about how this was done. We're going to cover the changes that were made, the equipment that was implemented, and most importantly, the training that improved the quality of our CPR and cardiac arrest care. We'll also talk about the state of EMS, how we're recruiting and retaining paramedics, and where we're headed in 2026 with an increased focus on trauma care and hopefully implementing a whole blood program in the region. Before we get started, I just have one ask. If you're finding value in what we're doing, please rate and review the show on your favorite platforms. Also, please subscribe, share it with others. It really does help get it to the people that can use it. So our guest today is Chad Christian, career firefighter and paramedic with nearly 29 years in emergency services, beginning as a wildland firefighter in 1997. His career spanned roles from volunteer EMT and ski patroller to career firefighter paramedic and even president of the board of directors for the Mountain View Fire Protection District. He currently serves as the EMS chief for the city of Westminster. I know Chad well outside the job. I know he's an interesting dude with a ton of hobbies and a beautiful family. I've learned the hard way that you should never trust his mountain bike trail recommendations unless you enjoy unnecessary pain and are a masochist just like him. He also makes a mean sourdough loaf. Chad Christian, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for hosting and having me on. This is fun.
So anything I missed there?
I think you got most of it, the sourdough thing is all consuming. Like once you get into it, it turns into like more than a hobby. There's a symbiotic relationship with that starter, and it starts to take over your life. It's taking over the kitchen. There's starter everywhere. It's permanently adhered to all the surfaces in the kitchen. I don't know if that's a hobby. That's a lifestyle.
Yeah, you got an espresso lifestyle as well. You've made me well aware of, and I know that we could probably go on for hours and hours on this stuff because it's what we do. It's amazingly we get any work done in the process. But
espresso is how you get work done. It's the fuel.
It's true, and I hope you're caffeinated today because we're expecting you to tell some good stories because you always do. You and I came in about the same time to our roles, so it's kind of been the blind leading the blind. In our roles at the fire department, both of us been in operations our whole careers really, and then all of a sudden find us in these strategic roles.
Yeah, I love I like to tell the story about when you and I met, which was on my department ride along. If everybody recalls, we used to do these 24-hour rides, and I was stationed out at Station 3 with you and your crew, and that was my first introduction to Westminster Fire. I honestly didn't even know where Westminster was. Like I saw the sign on the highway, but I got my letter to come test and was super excited, but I didn't know very much. So that first day with you and your crew, I think I distinctly remember running into VDA and Nolan Bailey, and it was just a great introduction, and I like that I've kind of come full circle. Here I am back under your wing again. So,
yeah, definitely the good old days with those 24-hour rides, man. You could really get to know someone. The person wasn't going to blow smoke for a 30-minute interview. Like you really got to know someone. We're
like speed dating.
It really was. It is in that sense. But yeah, good times. I'd really love to just jump into the success we've had in this last year. I think it's worth highlighting. We've always had a great culture for EMS, but I feel like we really upped our game this last year. Was I correct in saying that we've increased our ROSC rate 200%? Is that accurate?
Um, I have to rerun the numbers because I was trying to do a whole year, but yeah, I'd say it's pretty close. We went from um, around 20-ish% rate of ROSC, just meaning the times during a resuscitation where we achieve a ROSC. And then the last I looked, which is probably a couple months ago now, we were up around 40%,
Mm.
45%. So yeah, I guess that's 200. I'm not good at math. You have to help me there, but
So no, pretty remarkable. And I know, we can argue all day long how we're tracking data and that sort of thing. But I think the thing to recognize here is that we haven't changed the way we're tracking the data, but we are seeing the successes of this program, and
yeah,
it's
for
pretty
sure.
impressive.
Yeah, I think the data is pretty telling, and data always comes with some caveats. But I like to look at the data as what is actionable. It's more to in my mind, it's a compass. It's not a precise measurement. It's helping us determine if we're headed in the right direction, and I definitely think that we are.
Yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. What what drove this increased focus on high quality CPR and cardiac arrest care?
Well, just kind of trying to dream big. I think of if we had to wrap the mission statement of what EMS section does, in my mind, it's save lives, reduce suffering. It's 4 words, simple. Um, and really, as I started looking about that, thinking about our work in those terms, what's the biggest bang? What's the most important thing we can do in emergency services and the fire department and EMS? And it's how do we increase our out of hospital cardiac arrest survival rate? Um, Really, that's our expectation that makes us feel good, but it's the public's expectation too. What can we do to help people survive these events? And a couple years ago, I went to the MSAC conference. We went to the presentation put on by the Resuscitation Academy, which is sort of this another nationwide initiative to improve CPR performance. And I kind of came away from that with a couple of main points. And the first thing was, well, we're already doing CPR. We do that all the time, and we're good at it. Like, next question, like what's so important about this? But it wasn't until I kind of got out of my own way and thought critically about CPR and how we're doing it and whether or not we can tell if we're doing it right or not, or if that's just an assumption that we had. That was really the first step, looking at how we do CPR and if we're as good as we think we are. The second part of that was there was a doc there whom I have immense respect for, that I always enjoyed handing off patients to in the ER. And he was pretty adamant in his dislike for Lucas CPR. What came out of that conference was, if anybody tells you that they can apply a Lucas machine in less than 30 seconds, you should take that bet and then beat them over the head with it for being foolish. And if that resonates with anybody, you can probably figure out who that doc was. Um, so I got to thinking, like, are we doing this right? Like, how can we improve, and how can we measure this? Because you can't really improve what you don't measure. So this was back when I was a SAM, really, and that kind of just prompted me to start working with crews, prototyping, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. And what was kind of born out of that was, the first crack at our Lucas integrated CPR model. And that itself isn't anything new or rocket sciencey. It's just figuring out how to really drill down and quantify our compression fractions and our pauses. And how do we do a Lucas CPR model without breaking those core tenets of AHA guidelines? How do we maintain high compression fractions and limit pauses. So that was kind of like the genesis of the idea. But really, all of this stuff comes back to how do you do more CPR? Whether that's, how do you perfect your CPR with your crews? How do you get more CPR out in the community? How do you kind of distribute that response and make it faster and more likely that people in cardiac arrest are going to receive CPR and AEDs?
So basically, what it comes down to is like any good firefighter, you saw a challenge, and it was the challenge that inspired you.
Absolutely. It was like a hold my beer moment. Like, let's go. I think we can do this.
Yeah, and we also had great timing, right? We had already been using the Lucas, and for anybody outside of our organization that may not be familiar with it, it's a mechanical CPR device. We've had great success with it, but we were also getting ready to implement a new life pack monitor, right? And so, can you talk about how the timing was just right to integrate all these pieces of equipment?
Yeah, that was sort of a really serendipitous moment for us because, bringing out a new piece of equipment like a cardiac monitor, um, that's a capital piece of equipment. That's like a 10-year investment in a tool that is used daily. So we kind of prescribed a staged training program that would get people reps with the LifePak 35 while reinforcing these concepts that we were trying to lay out with Lucas integrated CPR. And we just set some goals. And, we didn't even worry too much about the legitimacy of those goals. We kind of just pulled some arbitrary numbers out. We decided, hey, let's plan to have crews, not just medics or EMTs or whoever, but the crews together do 10 reps of this training throughout the year, which seemed like a low number, but when you actually try to figure out how to do it, it takes time and
Mhm.
effort. And that's, it's like 210 um, repetitions. So really it was just committing to that path and working through what ended up being kind of repetitive, but to develop the foundation for training that gives everybody like common sheet music, which I think was really the critical leap.
I remember when we started talking about this plan, the training plan, and seemed like a lot. We've already got a lot on our plates, but it's amazing to see how much success we could have by just truly going back to basics. And you talked about team there, and I just want to focus on that for a minute because you see these things, this increased cardiac arrest care, you're automatically thinking advanced care. It's got to be that our paramedics are just the best of the best, which I think they are. But our success on this really does come down to the team. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You mentioned the LifePak 35, and I'm happy to talk more about that
Yeah.
device. But if there's no, it's not like a Lazarus machine that's going to like just suddenly turn people back on. There isn't think something like that. There's not a magic bullet or just this magical toy that's going to dramatically increase what we do. Our secret sauce is that we can deliver a 5-person resuscitation team to a scene in 6.5 minutes. Like that's the magic. And through the course of these trainings, one of the things we had to kind of overcome was, there's some of our old school mentality, like you and we probably had periods in our career where we had these like solid, stable crews where we got to work with people. And, you can probably think back to teams that you had where
Mhm.
things were automatic, where people knew what they needed to do. A thing appears in your hand before you have to ask for it, and because somebody is tuned into what you're doing. Those are really high performance teams, but they're kind of one off. It's not easy to replicate that. So what we're trying to do with all this training is sort of franchise the success of high performance medics and make that become the standard. And as you know, our EMS field coordinator, Raphael Uriasti likes to say, we all go up together. Let's take this success and make it the standard, and everybody move on from there. So what we've done is establish a baseline understanding for everybody, wherever they are, if they're a firefighter, engineer, a officer, a medic, whomever, that when you arrive on a scene where there's CPR to be done, everybody has an understanding of what that's going to look like. Everybody knows the cadence and the pattern of action that's going to have to take place. So that reduces the cognitive load on a medic from having to manually sort of individually make assignments and tell everybody what to do to a model where everybody's already preconditioned that certain things are going to get done in certain order. And that frees up the medic to make more complex decisions and to take a step back and start to really manage that patient holistically.
Yeah, I went through a few of the training sessions and I was just so impressed. It was just a great balance of just getting hands on, but then also, getting into the science behind resuscitation, understanding the why behind it. And then we had metrics to show how we were doing. Our equipment has come a long way, our training equipment. But it's amazing when you sort of gamify it a little bit, how much people get into it. They want to win. And
Absolutely, they want to
and
win.
now we're seeing the benefits of this a year later when we're seeing the impact we're making. And it's amazing when it comes full circle like that. I just went through my CPR recertification training the other day and I was absolutely humbled when I walked out of there because these sensors aren't lying. Like they're telling us how far we're compressing that chest. They're telling us our rate of compression for giving enough pause or recoil, oh my gosh, it's humbling, but all you want to do is get better. The old days we'd get on the chest, we'd go through the motions, we'd do our Baywatch CPR, and then we walk away with our new card. I just really appreciate the work that's being done. Can you walk us through these sessions and kind of the main teaching points of these training sessions that really led to this increased, just the way that we look at resuscitation, but then also the way we perform?
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned that some of the simulation equipment that we have, even just having, call them QCPR mannequins that can give you feedback information about compression fraction. And honestly, even if we didn't have that stuff, you can get a really good approximation of this with just two stopwatches, like a total timer versus a time spent on compressions to come up with your compression fraction. But we started paying attention to compression fraction and the amount of time that we're spending off the chest. And like you said, gamifying that, between crews or even crews against themselves. We did some A/B challenges, especially for people that were like, I'm not convinced here. I think I have a better way. Um, no problem. Let's do that. Let's see, give it a shot. Let's see what you can do. And if you can beat this, and if you can, that's great. Cause maybe it's a better way. We'll take what steal it, and then we'll franchise that. But really every time we did that, like this just sort of simple, methodical way of, applying the Lucas has won out, and, we're seeing, so in our training plan, we trained against a 90% compression fraction and a pause gate of 10 seconds or less. Those are the requirements. And throughout the year, we had different modes of this. We had, probationary firefighters doing their qualifications on the Lucas. So the crews were kind of conscripted into, running through this in that regard. We had ACLS where we were doing scenarios in that. We had quarterly check-ins with our SAM officers. We had visits from our field coordinators. About halfway through the year, we do an annual firefighter down training, which is kind of the Super Bowl of fire trainings for the SAM officers, which has had just a really positive impact, I think. And that was kind of the midterm exam. And we found that at about 6 months, we had only one crew that wasn't able to meet those requirements in terms of compression fraction and pauses. And that was really because they didn't understand that this was real, that the sim mans needed to have actual compressions done on them. They were kind
Hmm.
of doing some Hollywood CPR. But once they figured that out, they corrected and met the requirements no problem. So um yeah, I think it's been fun. It's been interesting, and it has been sort of repetitive, but
Hmm.
we have just dramatically improved. Now we're on the back end of this cycle where, with the LifePak 35, with a technology called CodeStat, which basically aggregates our LifePak 35 cardiac arrest data, I can see what we're doing in terms of compression fractions in the real world on actual calls. And we got that up and running. We've got data from about July.
Hmm.
And I check this out regularly, and we are maintaining compression fractions in excess of 90% throughout 20, 30, 40-minute resuscitations. It's really, really remarkable what the crews are doing.
Super impressive. And I'm impressed by our staff and how, they could have been kind of skeptical of the whole thing. And because we haven't had great success through the years with cardiac arrest care. And they jumped on board. They embraced the technology. I think we saw, like you mentioned, a leverage point here. We had a good opportunity to bring in that piece of equipment, that LifePak 35, integrate it with our Lucas, rise to the challenge. That's the other thing here. This year, the American Heart Association comes out with their, updated guidelines, and there's all this chatter out there that they're not recommending to use the Lucas anymore. And all they were saying was, you can do manual CPR as good as the Lucas. They're not saying you can't use the Lucas anymore, but I think it confused some people for a bit. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that was that was an interesting recommendation, and it all comes down to context in my mind. We tend to go with these binary choices. We talked about this before, but like, we want to do the best thing, whatever the best thing is. So tell us, is manual CPR the best? Is Lucas
Hmm.
CPR the best? We'll just do it that way.
Right.
And I think what the recommendations really showed us was that, in my mind, was actually kind of a win for the Lucas. It was saying, yeah, there's not a significant clinical difference. Both things are squishing the heart, they're squeezing blood out of it, and they're circulating it through the body. Um, so I read that as a positive thing. And if you read the rest of the recommendation, it states like this study was not able to capture um, elements of Lucas CPR, such as safety, such as patient movement, such as other logistic considerations and that happen in the real world. We are doing CPR in austere environments, and there's a
Hmm.
million things that trip us up that are different than what can be replicated in a study. Um, and to that point, we haven't created a mandate that says you shall use Lucas or you shall do this much CPR before application of the Lucas. And
Hmm.
that was done with intention because I want our medics to be able to have clinical judgment. There will be times when Lucas isn't appropriate. Either the patient's too small or too big, or there's some operational thing that prevents it. Um, and we also know there's tons of times when just pure manual CPR does not work. If you're trying to, take someone down the stairs at an apartment complex with CPR happening, it does not work. You're gonna end
Hmm.
up with like a 2-minute pause just getting them down the stairs, and by that, your time's kind of up. So I think that there's a grain of salt in there with the American Heart's recommendations, and our current model embraces that. We're trying to combine the best of both worlds. We're trying to uh, principles of high performance CPR. We're practicing with feedback mannequins and feedback devices. We are um, using tools like metronomes. We have you know um, leadership positions in place, monitoring this and switching compressors frequently. And we're applying um, CPR initially because it's faster. It is. You can do it
Hmm.
instantly, and it's very effective. And then we are staging the Lucas. We are being patient with ourselves in our treatment of our people, doing multiple rounds of CPR sometimes to get the Lucas on in a way that doesn't break those American Heart rules. So I think this hybrid model really captures the spirit of what American Heart wants us to do, the science behind resuscitation, and what's practical and meaningful for our crews.
It is really impressive watching where we've come. I remember sitting in on some of the early trainings and wondering how the heck we're going to get a Lucas on in less than 10 seconds. And you're right. It's not so binary. It, it doesn't have to happen immediately. We're doing pieces and parts as we go. We're continuing that manual CPR. It comes down to just basic team coordination, and we've just put so much focus in it. I love it, and I think it's going to carry over to many of the initiatives we're hoping to do, both in EMS and on the fire side moving forward. I think so much of EMS in the past has centered around that individual clinician, that individual care provider. How much does that paramedic know? And then it's all about just the paramedic dishing out assignments. And now we're really doing a better job of delineating roles and responsibilities and making everybody understand that we need every single person on that scene, including some of our oversight, like you talked about. And I'd like to just touch on that real quick because you've mentioned a couple of times the SAM officer position. To people outside of our department, our region may not be familiar with what our SAM officer is, and you came from that rank. It's a super cool position. In basically the SAM officer is a safety and medical officer. It's what would be considered combining a couple positions, maybe for some larger organizations, but it's the way we've got to make things work. It's still a super cool job. Can you talk about that SAM officer position just a little bit for people's awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. Still my favorite job. I mean, I like what I'm doing now, but SAM is still my favorite job in the fire service. We, as you said, we run this safety and medical officer role where, in the safety side of things, SAMs respond to all high risk, low frequency, high chaos, high consequence events. So think of it, structure fires. Think of the response card as like structure fires, explosions, shootings, stabbings, um, um, vehicle extrications, um, anything where an IC has a potential not necessarily for overload, but where an IC could definitely benefit from handing off some of those safety and observation elements to another officer. So on a structure fire, SAM really becomes like a forward scout for the incident commander. I always thought of it as like I go into orbit. I start orbiting the scene and taking mental notes of the evolution of the scene. Are we making progress? How fast is the fire advancing? Are our actions matching up with the IAP? Um, are there things that I'm seeing that aren't obvious to the incident commander, and how do I make them aware of those critical things? Um, it represents kind of a shift for a lot of fire departments, I think, because it takes somebody and puts them into this sort of white space where they aren't task saturated and they aren't command. So they have a unique perspective on an incident, and they have a unique ability to kind of see the evolution of an incident from almost this outside perspective that can be really, really valuable for the incident commander. And then on the medical side of things, what the um, SAM officer brings is oversight, mentorship. They bring um, a medic who is an officer to complex medical scenes, not just terrible things, but also, hey, help me work through this complex medical legal issue. I've got some weird paperwork here that I need some guidance on. And that takes some of that responsibility, liability, consequence off of a medic, lets them focus on their tasks at hand, and brings a company officer level position with some oversight in alongside of them. And probably don't talk about that enough and how that actually, how mechanically that works. But I think that has had a really positive effect for our medics on scenes as well.
Yeah, for sure. They are a great resource. And I know in a perfect world, like I mentioned, it would be ideal to have separation. It would be great to have a standalone safety officer and a standalone, shift medical officer. But for our size department, this model works, and it also works regionally. I've mentioned before in this podcast that we're all part of an automatic aid 7-department automatic aid region. So we take our small 6-station department and then we become one big 35-station department operationally. And we're all running with this same model. And so it works well. We can expand alarms. We get, multiple SAMs or multiple safety officers on scene. And their priority is safety when they're on a fire scene. They've got the training to back them. Like you said, they are a company officer level position. In fact, we've got as far as company officers goes, we've got the lieutenant, and then we've got the captain role. They hold the lieutenant rank, but compensation wise, they sit right in the middle of the lieutenant and captain. We're trying to find the right spot for them, but they hold a lot of influence. Autonomous job. I mean, it's pretty cool, the amount of trust they have, and like I said, influence as well. They're performing all the quality management, for their shift and coaching and mentoring. And it's just a really neat position. If anybody's ever interested in how that works, you can always reach out to us and we'd be glad to explain it. We talked a lot about the work we've done internally, but as we know, cardiac arrest resuscitation doesn't work without early intervention, right? It doesn't work without our public being informed. We've probably the coolest part about this whole process, we've leveraged our equipment onboarding, trained our people. But the other thing that we don't talk about enough, I think, is the work that we've done within our community simultaneously as we've done all this work. Can you talk about some of that work that we've done within our community and specifically within we're a municipal city fire department, what we've done within our city?
Yeah. This part's actually really exciting. I think this is stuff that's not entirely visible even to our own personnel all the time, but it's a critical piece of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival chain. How do we distribute CPR throughout our community? And my thought process was just, how do we, what's my sphere of influence? I love to train every single citizen of the city of Westminster in CPR, but that's not feasible for me to do in a year. If you look at high performing systems like, say, Seattle, they've got really great out of hospital cardiac arrest survival rates, but they also have a really high density of CPR trained citizens. They have a really high density of AEDs. They have high densities of CPR trained first responders, including police. And what that does is it puts CPR and AED on a scene faster than we can arrive. I think most of us were under this impression, this sort of myth in our heads that, the human body has about a 4-minute reserve of oxygen, and we've got about a 4-minute response time. So, hopefully those things line up. But the reality is we've got a minute to process a call and a minute to get out of the house and a 4-minute transit time. So we're looking more around 6 minutes before we even intervene. So if, by the numbers, we're losing about 10% survivability for every minute of delay in care, even when our super high performance CPR resuscitation crew shows up, we're already 60% behind that 8 ball. So having, embedding CPR agents to our community is the way that you start talking about more survival. So, again, I roll in, I'm the good idea fairy. I'm like, I don't know, how about we train like 500 city employees? That seems like a nice round number, not really considering that I have like 2 field coordinators that are able to accomplish this task. But it seemed like a cool idea and a good goal. And they actually nailed it. It's pretty remarkable how many people they've been able to train. And they have help. They have other help. We've got really great paramedics and firefighters and other folks that have volunteered and stepped up to help with some of these CPR trainings. But what they've done, the magic of this is that they've sort of they're like subversive agents. We've sent them into these other city departments and trained up IT and HR and finance and city manager's office on CPR, how to save lives, how to save the lives of their coworkers and loved ones. I say we, it's them. They've created a plan to train our police. I think this was the first time that we've ever been involved in training our police in CPR. So we've got the entire police force trained in CPR. As part of that conversation, it was revealed that the police could use some refresher on how to use their trauma kits. So we incorporated stop the bleed training into this. We brought in subject matter experts in our Lieutenant DeCrane, and he was able to go in and kind of speak in common language, train the PD in the use of those kits. That spiraled out of control. Now the rest of the city wants CPR stop the bleed training, which has been incredible. Didn't realize how empowering this stuff is. The city organization of, what are we at now, Chief? Like 1,500 people in the city.
Yeah.
They're doing regular active shooter lockdown drills. And when that gets combined with CPR stop the bleed, I think they find it massively empowering. It shifts their mindset from a victim to a responder. It gives them things to do in those types of events. And again, it's just super empowering. And now, through the work of our field coordinators and our CPR instructors, we have engaged all these members of these different city components in the work that we're doing. We've personalized it. We've made it real for these people through our expertise, our familiarity with CPR. CPR instructors that have actually done CPR, not just like one time, but like regularly for decades. So now, the work that we're doing gets framed in the minds of our city counterparts. So, when we need support from IT or HR, finance, or city manager's office, they have a deeper understanding of the work that we're doing. Now they are part of the fire department in a more realistic way. So I really think that has been a remarkable endeavor. It's turned bigger than I actually anticipated, but we've put 500 more CPR trained boots on the ground throughout our city. Um, as a multiplier effect to that, we've got, I have to look at the number, but I think it's like 68 AEDs distributed throughout city facilities, throughout the city, different city vehicles, city facilities, public-facing facilities. We are casting this broad safety net of CPR and AED access. And, that's not something we're going to necessarily have numbers for this year, but I think that's going to make our city safer as that becomes deeper embedded in our culture.
You're right. And you can't, some of those are the intangible benefits that you're talking about as well. This is a positive way to play politics, right? We're building relationships in a positive way, and it makes it so much easier. It's humanizing the approach when we do need to ask for something, when we need some support on an issue. They've already got that relationship built, and they know what we stand for. It's just been an extremely positive experience, and we're going to keep elevating that. You talked about the AED program, and the fire department basically administers that program. We're responsible for the program, which means that we've got a little control over it too, which is really cool. So maybe talk about how these AEDs, the AED kits, have become more than just about the AED, and we've added some supplies to it.
Yeah, again, this is it really has happened sort of organically and naturally, and again through the consistent efforts of our field coordinators. But again, with the training, with becoming CPR certified, with learning about AEDs, there's our city counterparts are interested. They want to know more. They want to do more. And that brought forth the Stop the Bleed curriculum. So, someone had the idea, well, could we put Stop the Bleed gear in with the AEDs and those cabinets, and then we would have, access to that stuff too. Aha moment. Yeah, let's do that. We've got relationships with vendors, and we've got, it's relatively inexpensive gear. Let's do that. Let's equip these places and enhance the safety. We believe in these programs, and it's a reasonable cost to do it. Let's do it. So now throughout the city with our AED placements, we have Stop the Bleed equipment as well. Um, and even just some of the adjacent supplies to stop the bleed. We've got tourniquets. We've got some hemorrhage control stuff in there. We've already had a couple of moments where city employees have acted and helped out their coworkers with some injuries. So that part of it's already working. And and again, now there's conversation, which is just great, and because people are they feel connected to us and what we can do for them and what their role is in emergencies and taking care of each other. So there's other conversation. Maybe there's room for the community access Narcan to be placed throughout the city. Maybe there's other things that we can look at that would enhance the health and safety of our employees and our citizens. And this isn't coming from me. This is being driven from people that have had a little taste of how they can help. And that's all it's really taken. Bring them in, show them what you do. People will be excited about it.
Yeah, and the Narcan it's starting to find its way to those kits as well. We're just wanting to ensure that we've got the right people trained in those areas. But I think within the next couple of months, we'll have Narcan at every single facility as a part of those kits as well. And it is cool. And it's not just about that that incident they may have to mitigate at that time. It's preparing for something big in the future. And we're going to need all the help that we can get. We're a small organization, and even if you're the biggest organization, that's where your success lies, is when you take the whole community approach like that. So just really, really cool how far we've come in recent years, and just how we're kind of starting to think outside the box. I'd love to talk about how we're recruiting and retaining paramedics. It's a big conversation across the country. Definitely a challenge for us. We're getting ready to build 2 new fire stations over the next couple of years. We've done the math. We know how many we need, but we've had some really good success this year in starting to train up and mentor our new crop of paramedics. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on the recruitment and retention issue when it comes to EMS?
Yeah, boss, I don't know what we're going to do. If anybody can leave the answer in the comments to help us out, that would be great. Um, I think it's been interesting. I think there's a shift in how we have to think about these things. I often think about how the organization probably is evolving faster than people like me are evolving. I grew up in this organization 20 years ago, got my start, was a paramedic. We were running 7,500 calls a year. And here we are 20 years later, and our call volume is, headed towards tripling that. And so the motivations and the reasons for becoming a paramedic are different now, I think, than they were for you and I when we signed up all that time ago. So I think we have to kind of prepare people differently and have kind of different expectations. I don't think we have the luxury anymore to kind of grab a new firefighter and be like, okay, well, hang out with us for 5 or 10 years, kind of get the lay of the land, and then when you're ready, you've had this body of experience. We'll get you on that paramedic train. I think the reality of today's environment for us is that um, our people are gaining experience faster. the call volume is higher than it was at one time. You know, if it's doubled or tripled since you and I were there, people are gaining that 10 years of experience in their first, 2.5 years or 3 years. So they're on a fast track already. I also think that there's some differences in society and differences in generations, and I think a lot of our new firefighters are hungry for challenge. They appreciate the challenge at the fire academy and their probationary year, and I think there's a risk of kind of plateauing out. And I think that some of these newer folks are aware of that. They're
Mhm.
again hungry for this challenge and ready to learn more and become leaders in our organization. And yeah, for everybody out there in TD land, I think that that is a significant difference that maybe people in our organization don't always recognize because we're so close to it. But paramedics in our fire department are expected to be leaders. They're expected to be mentors. They have a high degree of autonomy and responsibility that exceeds just the certification alone. So, our paramedic program is really a professional development program. It is a pathway to becoming a leader, becoming more involved, becoming engaged. It teaches you critical things about crew resource management and scene management, and gets you accustomed to that cadence of a call. How do I take this terrible situation and move it towards a positive result? All that kind of makes our paramedics kind of different and special. And I think where we are now with our expansion and where we are in kind of the life cycle of our department, we have lesser tenured people who are experienced, motivated, who are you know becoming positioned to be leaders and influencers within our department. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about watching the development of these brand new paramedics already thinking like, wow, this person's going to be an amazing FTI someday. This is the person I want to make more of. I want to grab these paramedics I haven't even, or these EMTs I haven't even met yet, and put them in this person's pocket for a couple of months and see what happens. It's going to be great. So I don't know if there's any magic bullet there either, Chief. I think it's just, kind of trying to put this into the right perspective for people, and being excited about the role and showing them that um, paramedic is a path to some influence, some autonomy. It's an exciting role where you get a lot of self direction. That can be a um, it can be a springboard for your career, or it could be the career long journey for you. But there really aren't a ton of downsides to it, unless you're afraid of a little extra work. And we don't really have that problem. I think we've got really motivated people.
We do, and you're right. There is no better way to get great experience, get great reps, learn how to make decisions, get comfortable making decisions. The crew resource management, like you mentioned, it comes naturally, and then it starts to come out when they become fire officers potentially down the road, or chiefs. And it's not the path for everyone, and we recognize that. Again, we talked binary things earlier. It's like this binary conversation or argument out in the fire service right now of whether we should have EMS within fire departments, and whether we should be doing transport, and whether we can handle that. And I don't think it's a binary discussion at all. I think it depends on your organization, your community you're serving. And I truly believe that you can do great EMS and you could provide a great fire response at the same time. There's this kind of a push right now for, single role paramedicine to deal with the paramedic shortage. And I'm not opposed to that if that's what's right for that specific community. But what makes our team different in Westminster, and really in the region as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important to try to put a finger on this because it really speaks to our model and the value that I believe that we can provide with our model. And you're right. It's not a one size fits all proposition. It's not going to work everywhere. I think in our community, our sort of mid-sized suburban fire department, where we are surrounded and supported by really pretty similar
Mhm.
departments as well, um, it makes a lot of sense. I spoke to the idea of a 5-person resuscitation team, and to me, that's why fire-based EMS really shines and why it's efficient. It works well for us. Being able to put a 5-person resuscitation team in someone's living room in 6.5 minutes is absolutely remarkable. That's the model American Heart teaches to. Um, I've done that with a 2-person ambulance crew in a past life, and it's a mess. It's hard. It's hard to get all those jobs done at that high of level without that support of your crew. Um, I think the fire-based EMS model and that team approach allows us to have really high expectations, even out of our EMTs. Our EMTs are just technicians or ambulance drivers. They are critical crew members who receive parallel training. Our EMTs are not certified in PALS or ACLS, of course, but they're there for the training. They are
Mhm.
participating in those scenarios. They are getting that knowledge, and that elevates them. We have the ability to provide that because of this team-based approach. Um, and I think the same is true on the fire end of it. When we can, with a single company, we can deploy basically an initial attack crew, an incident commander, and an out crew, with the resources that come out of one house, and um, that's really profound. I think that really gives us a tactical advantage on fire grounds. Um, Having that shared sense of training and tradition, having that sort of interoperability between medic unit and um, engine company, where you could be in different seats and understanding each other's jobs, I think is a higher level of efficiency than trying to silo these things. Again, at least for us, it's a ton. It's a mountain of work. It's a mountain of training on both end, and to
Mhm.
try to accomplish all of those things within the certification cycles is challenging, but we're doing it. We're making it happen at a really high level. I don't think in our community that we could do a single. I mean, again, not opposed to it, but like right now, I think it would be really difficult to have a single role medic unit provide the level of value that we get out of our model.
Yeah, it would be a detriment to our fire response as well because we would lose operators on the fire ground. And this is in no way to say one way is better than the other. It just seems like that's been an ongoing argument out there. You and I both have experience in both places. We both come from a world of working on the private EMS side as well. And man, I respect the hell out of those people out there doing that work. And we both work for really, really good services as well. Some of the best individual providers that I have ever worked with came from some of those, private EMS services and probably some of these single role fire department services. But it's hard to argue the team that we have, that it's already intrinsically in place, right? We're already operating that way day to day on the fire ground. We just translate it to the EMS scene. We go back and forth, like it's just, it's just part of the day to day. And so again,
Yeah.
I don't think this is a binary argument. I don't think one way is better than the other, but I am here to argue that fire-based EMS can work. And I think it's working well in our system.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I clearly clearly also have the bias, because I believe in our system, but yeah, seeing other ways of doing things. Um, yeah, it's funny. We talked in our command retreat a couple weeks ago and about investigation of other models. That's something that
Mhm.
I've looked around at as the EMS chief, and my answer was kind of short. It was like, yeah, I looked, and ours is the best. I believe that this is true for our community, but it's really hard to quantify because of those intangibles of that team concept of history, of shared experience, um, of doing this stuff together. Again, I think it's more efficient. I think the service delivery is great, and I think that the team spirit, the camaraderie, is important from both operations, but also from a behavioral health model. Again, that shared experience and the ability to have your crew and decompress and go through things together is really, really beneficial and profound as well. And again, hard to quantify, but important.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the culture you have, and I know there's some fire departments out there that are probably, frankly, doing a terrible job with it, and probably shouldn't be in the business. But it's always been an important part of our culture, just as our response to structure fires and extrications have been a all emergency response. We have truly embraced the all hazards approach in our culture, and I stand behind it all day long. Let's move into what we're looking at for 2026. Some of it's already in place because we're well within the year, but we focused a lot on that cardiac arrest care, and we're going to continue that focus. We're not just going to stop. We're not there yet, but I think a big focus for us in 2026 is then looking at that trauma care and enhancing that stop the bleed training. Can you talk about where we're going in 2026 and the thought behind it?
Yeah, this is pretty exciting because it's also rapidly evolving. This stuff seems to change all the time. In fact, just this past week, we got the updated version of protocols that had some important updates
Mhm.
in the trauma care sections. Um, what we're trying to do is sort of take the success we had with medical resuscitation and apply that model to trauma resuscitation. So, um, beginning again with the end in mind, we've got this promise of whole blood. And whole blood, by all accounts, is sort of revolutionary in the realm of trauma care. For our entire careers and for the generation of medics before us, our only tool has been really speed, how fast we can get somebody to a trauma center or a surgeon, and crystalloid fusion infusion. So, and we know that, we've both run those calls where we've got enough saline into somebody to theoretically increase the pressure in their vasculature, but we know it's not carrying oxygen. It's not providing perfusion. It's sort of a feel good treatment that makes us feel better about doing something, but doesn't provide what the patients need. So the promise of having whole blood in the field is really profound, and it's like the first time in trauma care where we could really, um, you know, really sort of temporize that trauma process and give them a better chance at survival. Hugely impactful tool. Um, we've got partners in the region that have started their whole blood programs. We've got Arvada Fire District, just our nearby agency. They've already got their program up and rolling. They've been running it for a number of months now with very early but profound success. We've got a lot of movement in the north area in this direction. We've got other partners who are either have a timeline or an intention to implement these programs. Um, and we're right on their heels there. We're all trying to, again, move up together. We've got so many good things going for us that I almost can't believe that it can't be done here. The model would be basically whole blood on sand units throughout the north area. We already have all this infrastructure. We've got CAD to CAD, closest unit, GPS. And we are sending the closest SAMs already. That's a technological hurdle that a lot of other areas, are years from overcoming. We've already got that stuff. Having those cooperative relationships allows us to do that and leverage that. Um, we also want to do it intentionally in the right way. So we're building up our trauma capabilities headed that direction. So looking at things that we already have that we can optimize. One of those things is TXA, tranexamic acid, and that's a medication that prevents your body from breaking down the clots that you're already making. So it helps stop hemorrhages. We took a look at that. We ran some data. It turned out, we weren't using it to its max potential. This is a function of some great data work in the background, but our senior management analyst was able to apply the TXA protocol to our patient history and determine which which of these cases would be candidates for TXA, and when do we actually use it. Hugely underutilized. That's low hanging fruit that we can work on today that improves our trauma care. We can look at scene times and the cadence of the crews on scenes. What absolutely needs to be done in a 3 to 5 minute window on a scene before you leave for the hospital. How can we shore that stuff up? And we've learned from the CPR training that we did, those models, that um, we're actually already pretty good at this. Many of our trauma activations are running on like a 5 minute scene time, which is kind of flying in most cases. But the fractional incremental improvements we make through coordination and repetition add up and translate into meaningful improvements in patient outcome. So I'm looking forward to this year for trauma care and how we're going to be implementing these new processes and procedures. The good news is that we've got really incredible medics and EMTs that are already really high performing trauma operators. So again, we don't have any heavy lifts here. It's not stuff that we've got to reshape culture or retrain people. We're just doing little fractional tweaks that are going to add up to big differences over the long run.
If you could talk real quick about, for people who aren't familiar, what goes into a whole blood program, because we're not there yet. We've been doing deep dives. Some of our regional partners are starting to purchase equipment, that sort of thing. Can you just talk about the equipment and policies and the relationships that go into a whole blood program, how to make it work, how to keep the blood fresh and at correct temperature and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. It's a major lift because it's not possible for us to do this alone. This isn't about just like ordering the right stuff and then, we'll call up our rep and get a shipment of blood and we're ready to rock. It takes a huge amount of coordination. First off is, the blood bank. Blood is a very, very, very valuable resource. And there's ethical considerations around it. I know from my perspective, I'm not willing to engage in a whole blood program just for the sake of doing it. If it involves a delay of care or potentially wasting this valuable resource in the form of blood, I'm much less interested if those are pieces of it. So you need partnerships with the blood bank, with your local trauma centers. Not all trauma centers utilize whole blood in their care. Some are geared for blood components. So while you could still bring them patients that you started whole blood for, it's not as seamless a transition. So there's partnership work there to see what happens. There's a whole waiver process. Whole blood is not a standard part of our state of Colorado standard of care. So there's a medical oversight component to that. In terms of actually handling the blood, it's a living thing. It is not a supply. It doesn't come out of the freezer. It has no real shelf life. So you have to create a system where you accept blood. There's a custodial chain to verify who's had this blood and where it's gone and where it's been. There's a process of temperature tracking. Most of our partners are looking at automated systems for this, very specialized coolers that have their roots in special forces and military application that can maintain, monitor, and then transmit those temperature readings in real time. which kind of provides the basis of what they call cold chain tracking to make sure that this blood stays within this very narrow temperature range throughout its journey from blood bank to field to patient to hospital. There's just a ton of logistics involved, and none of it's insurmountable, but it does represent kind of a shift from what we're used to doing. You can't do whole blood in like a cowboy fashion. You have to take it from a systems partnership approach. And again, you have to be able to rationalize its use ethically. And that was important to me from the outset. Like, is this going to make sense for us? We are like 5 to 10 minutes from a trauma center in most cases. Is it going to make sense if we have to have a medic unit wait on a scene for a SAM officer to show up? Is that the best decision here? So we did a deep dive again with some data, and I asked our senior management analyst, how often, given an average response time for a medic unit to a trauma alert and the average response time to a scene from a SAM officer, give me like a 3 to 5 minute window between the two. How often would the arrival of the SAM unit have delayed the departure of a medic unit, assuming that blood handoff happens and then the medic unit transports to the hospital? And we looked back through I think we have 5 years of data in our reporting system. And the answer was never. It doesn't happen. You've got a response time difference of about 20 seconds between a medic unit, which live in districts generally and have a pretty close proximity to their calls, and even the SAM, that is a single resource throughout our entire city. The difference in response time is only about 20 seconds. So unless we're talking about a sub 20-second scene time, there shouldn't be many cases where a SAM delivering whole blood delays that transfer or that transport. And then the question was like, well, is it even needed here? Are we going through this brain damage for just something that's a buzzword and that's a cool thing and a new toy? And we looked at that too, the same thing, got this, computer genius, mad scientist, data analyst who's able to pull this stuff out. And we looked at the criteria for both TXA and whole blood, which is kind of a complicated lift because you're asking the system for data that it doesn't actually have. You have to combine things like vital signs to come up with some of those criteria. But we were able to find that we are, it's about 6 to 8 cases a month for Westminster, just talking about traumas. That's not even talking about GI bleeds or postpartum hemorrhage cases where whole blood may have been indicated. So I think when all these things come together, we've got this regional partnership, we've got the technology, we've got the need, and we have the ethical latitude for this to have meaning for us. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't pursue this.
Yeah, I think the regional approach is where it's at. And I think that's what probably would have held us back in the past with something like this, being that smaller department, relying on our own resources. But the sky's the limit now when we've got the ability to spread those resources out. And like you're talking about that SAM officer being that autonomous response vehicle, we've got them coming from all over as well. Every department has one of them, and we're going to get the closest one, period. That's it. And so it's fantastic. It's crazy how far we've come. You're talking a little bit about when we first met, and I was a brand new paramedic at the time, and I can remember those fluid overload calls we'd have, where you got the person that's got bullet holes all over their chest and stuff, and you're pumping so much fluid into them that it's just clear. It's just coming out clear. It's just a different world that we're in now.
Yeah. And again, I think there's the shift that's important here is that we are doing a much better job now, I think, about being clinicians, about thinking about the why behind things and giving our people the latitude to make clinical decisions. We're not looking for cookbook medics. We're not looking for checklist followers. We want people that are making critical decisions based on that information. So while back in the day, that was the only tool we had, is okay, let's drive fast and dump saline into these folks. I think whole blood represents a brighter future where we're able to make a much more profound impact.
And it is, like you alluded to, it's so much more than just the blood product itself. It's the holistic approach. It's the fact that we're going to approach trauma care as trauma care, and not just focus on that tool itself. And I think that that's where it's at. And I appreciate just all the work that you've done in our EMS section, and your staff is just absolute rock stars. Because as you alluded to, I mean, we trained over 500 city employees in less than a year, and that's just on top of those extra duties they have. And you'd think you'd have a staff of 10 out there. You've got two of them, and then you've got your SAM officers as well, but they're more attached to the line operations. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, really got a ton of gratitude for this team. This came up, and as I'm able to check in with like the PALS training we just did in ACLS last year, speaking to this team, what I've found really remarkable is that when we're doing these trainings, um, I think our crews have just a ton of respect for
Mhm.
our field coordinators and our SAMs, and they have enough respect that they have the ability to fail when we're in a training. A lot of times a training turns into like an informal testing scenario where there's pressure and you don't feel comfortable not knowing an answer. What I've noticed is that our folks are willing to have conversations with these instructors. They're willing to put themselves out there, and they know that they will be treated with respect and they will be engaged. And I think that that opens up an opportunity for learning in our line staff that is really exciting and isn't really that common to have that sort of instructor student relationship. And I'm insanely proud of the work that they're able to do with our crews.
Like I mentioned earlier, I was at CPR training the other day, and I may have to file a complaint with you because I may have uh, been victim to a little bit of harassment during that time period, but it may have also been that my scores were really bad. And like I said, I was totally humbled. But no, they're great. They're absolutely fantastic, and I do love our approach. And it's the same approach we're taking with our fire training. I think there was a time back in the day where you had to kind of justify your existence as an instructor in front of the classroom, and it was just a different approach. Then that was the same way on the fire ground, and we're not that way anymore. It's truly a great learning environment. But yeah, just appreciate you, Chad, and the work that your staff is doing out there. We are shorthanded, but man, we're doing some really good stuff. We've been talking for a while. I want to start to close this thing out, but just want to give you a chance if there's anything we missed today or anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, we could keep going. We could just keep
I
going.
know we could.
We don't got to be back to work till like Monday morning, so we got time. But um, no, I think I'm just really proud of EMS section, but our department. Um, I've always been proud of us. I thought we were at a great spot, 20 years ago when I got hired, and I was proud to be a Westminster firefighter. And the more we've grown and evolved, I think that that is just been almost exponential. I'm proud of the work our people do, the way they treat people. I'm proud of the interactions that they have. They are engaged. They care. They are proud of the work that they are doing. It has meaning for them. They're not just, showing up to collect a check. They're in these roles because they want to be, and they believe in what they're doing. And I'm grateful for that more than anything else. Any of the other good things we got going on. We've got people that really belong doing the things that they're doing.
Well said. So well said. I appreciate you coming on, Chad. I really do. Appreciate our friendship and the work you do out there. I assume it's okay for me to put your contact information in the show notes, and I'll put mine in there as well. If anybody has any questions about what we're doing or some of the things we talked about today, uh, please feel free to reach out. Also, on another note, if you want to reach out and propose different show ideas or have feedback for the show, please email opstalk.wfd@gmail.com. opstalk.wfd.com. We'll see you next time.